What if one wrong decision could change your entire destiny? Imagine a young woman in the crowded chaos of Lagos, only trying to deliver a dress and make ends meet. But in her rush, she steps onto the wrong bus, an unusual bus, far too luxurious to belong in a noisy motor park. What she doesn't know is that this single mistake will carry her across the sea, into a billionaire's secret island, a paradise of unimaginable wealth, but also a cage of dangerous secrets. Tonight, you will witness her journey through love, betrayal, and power struggles, as we tell the story of Amarachi, the girl who boarded the wrong bus and found herself trapped in a billionaire's hidden world. In the heart of Lagos, a single mistake leads Amarachi into the bus ride that will change her life forever. The sun had barely risen over Lagos, but the city was already alive with its usual orchestra of chaos. Ojuelegba Bus Park roared like a restless beast, Danfo conductors hanging dangerously out of yellow buses, yelling routes in sharp voices that competed with hawkers, selling everything from sachet water to steaming puff-puff. Engines coughed, horns blared without rhythm, and the air smelled of fried akara mixed with exhaust fumes. It was here that Amarachi, clutching a carefully wrapped gown, wove her way through the madness like a woman on the edge of time. She was not just running an errand, she was running on desperation. At 22, Amarachi was still an apprentice at a small tailoring shop in Surulere, dreaming of someday starting her own brand. But dreams cost money, and Lagos did not wait for dreamers. Her rent was due. Her mother had called again last night about unpaid bills, and her client today, a wealthy woman with a cruel tongue, had threatened to cancel the order if the gown didn't arrive before noon. Amarachi couldn't afford another failure. Not today. Sweat ran down her forehead as she adjusted the gown in its nylon cover and pushed through the crowd. She muttered prayers under her breath. If she could deliver this dress and collect the balance, maybe she'd finally clear her debts with her landlady. Maybe she could even buy herself a decent meal tonight. But Lagos had other plans. At the edge of the park, she spotted a bus unlike anything she had ever seen. It was sleek, black, and gleamed under the morning sun, standing out like a diamond in a pile of gravel. No scratched yellow paint, no cracked windows, no conductor hanging at the door. Instead, uniformed attendants ushered passengers in with polite nods. Amarachi blinked in confusion. Was this a new transport company? She hesitated. The bus she was supposed to board was nowhere in sight, and time was slipping fast. The attendants didn't call out routes like the regular conductors did. They simply smiled at a list they held and motioned silently. The passengers stepping in wore expensive clothes, Italian suits, flowing lace outfits that smelled of imported perfume. Something about it felt wrong, but something about it also felt like salvation. With her heart pounding, Amarachi clutched her gown tighter and slipped in. The interior nearly stole her breath. Plush leather seats, tinted windows, and a faint fragrance of vanilla and oud replaced the usual sweat and dust of Lagos buses. Each seat had a bottle of imported water neatly placed on a tray. No blaring Fuji music, no conductor shouting, "Enter with your change." Instead, a calm silence hung in the air. Amarachi sat gingerly by the window, her eyes darting around. The passengers barely acknowledged her. They were absorbed in hushed conversations, their tones measured, their words indistinct. She caught fragments. The council, tonight's gathering, the island. The island? Her brows furrowed. She had never heard of such a place being on any Lagos route. She tried to lean forward and ask the middle-aged woman beside her where the bus was heading. The woman only gave her a cold, dismissive glance as though speaking to her would be beneath her. Amarachi shrank back into her seat, anxiety bubbling in her chest. The bus began to move, gliding out of Ojuelegba with unnerving smoothness. At first, Amarachi comforted herself. Maybe this was just a high-class private transport. Maybe she could alight at the next stop. But the driver did not slow. The familiar landmarks disappeared as the city blurred past. Minutes stretched into an hour. Amarachi's palms grew clammy. This was not her route. She recognized nothing of the road they now traveled. When the bus finally slowed, it was not at a typical Lagos bus stop. Ahead was a massive gated terminal by the coast. Security men in dark suits stood tall, scanning faces with devices Amarachi had never seen before. Behind the gates, she glimpsed something unbelievable. A sleek ferry waiting at the dock, its polished surface reflecting the rising sun like molten gold. Her heartbeat thundered. One by one, passengers disembarked calmly, as if this was routine. Guards nodded them through respectfully. Not a single question asked. The efficiency, the order. It was unlike anything Amarachi had ever witnessed in Lagos. She rose quickly, clutching her gown, and tried to follow them out. Her only thought was escape. She would slip away before anyone noticed. She'd run back to the park, find the right bus, and still deliver her gown in time. But as she approached the door, something made her freeze. The door didn't open. She tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. She pushed harder, panic rising like fire in her chest. Still nothing. She glanced at the driver through the partition glass, but he ignored her completely. He only gave a slight nod to the guard outside before turning back to the wheel. A chill swept over Amarachi's body. Her throat went dry. The realization hit her with the force of a thunderclap. This was no ordinary bus, and she was not free to leave. The doors locked with a metallic click, trapping Amarachi inside, while outside, guards prepared to escort them straight onto the mysterious ferry waiting by the shore. The bus transforms into a ferry passage, leading Amarachi deeper into mystery. The metallic click of the locked doors echoed in Amarachi's ears, her pulse racing like the heartbeat of Lagos traffic. Before she could protest, uniformed guards boarded, their faces unreadable, their movements precise. One of them scanned the bus with a handheld device, nodding in satisfaction before gesturing for passengers to step out in an orderly manner. Amarachi hesitated, clutching the gown to her chest. She wanted to scream, to demand they let her out. But the sheer confidence of the passengers unsettled her. Nobody looked alarmed. Nobody questioned anything. They simply rose, their designer outfits swaying like waves of silk, and followed the guards as if this were routine. With trembling steps, Amarachi joined the line. What she saw beyond the gates stunned her into silence. The dock stretched like something out of a dream, polished steel walkways, blue LED strips lining the ground, and men in white uniforms waiting to usher passengers aboard. But it was the vessel itself that stole her breath, a futuristic private ferry, gleaming under the morning sun. Its sleek silver hull looked like liquid metal, and its tinted windows hid secrets within. It was more luxury yacht than ferry, a vessel designed not for transport, but for power and spectacle. Her throat tightened. This was no trip to any Lagos island she had ever heard of. A guard's hand pressed gently but firmly against her back, urging her forward. She staggered, her eyes darting to the open water ahead. The Atlantic stretched endlessly, dark and intimidating, the waves slapping against the shore as though warning her to turn back. But the ferry's engines purred softly, waiting like a predator about to move. She stepped onto the vessel. Inside, the world shifted again. Plush white leather seats, wrapped around tinted glass windows, offering panoramic views of the ocean. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers. A waiter, in a spotless uniform, offered glasses of champagne to the passengers, who accepted with casual grace. Laughter filled the air, low, controlled, the kind of laughter that belonged to people who owned more than nations could dream of. Amarachi sat awkwardly at the edge, hugging her gown as though it could shield her from this new reality. Her heart hammered against her ribs, the fear mixing with awe. She had never imagined such luxury existed outside of movies, but no matter how she tried, she couldn't ignore the chill of unease crawling up her spine. She leaned forward, attempting again to ask the woman beside her where they were going. The woman, dressed in emerald silk, looked at her as though she were invisible, before turning away with a dismissive flick of her wrist. Amarachi's cheeks burned. She wanted to vanish, and then she felt it. A gaze. Across the cabin, a man sat alone near the tinted window, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark suit tailored to perfection. He didn't join the laughter or the champagne. He sat still, one hand resting on a glass of water, the other on his knee. His eyes, piercing, unreadable, rested on Amarachi. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Amarachi's breath caught in her throat. She looked away quickly, but curiosity burned within her. Who was he? And why did his gaze feel different from the others? Less judgmental, more searching? Before she could dwell on it, the ferry lurched forward. Engines hummed, smooth yet powerful, as the vessel detached from the dock and glided into open water. The sea was merciless. Waves rose and fell like restless beasts, slapping hard against the hull. Outside, the sky darkened, heavy clouds gathering as though the ocean itself resisted their journey. Passengers barely flinched, sipping champagne with steady hands. But Amarachi? She clutched her seat, nails digging into the leather as the ferry rocked violently. The gown she carried nearly slipped from her arms. Her stomach churned. Her heart threatened to leap out of her chest. The man by the window, the one who had been watching her, finally moved. Calmly, he reached for the armrest beside him, gripping it with quiet strength. His eyes flickered to her again, almost reassuringly, as if silently telling her to hold on. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the sea in flashes of silver. Amarachi shut her eyes, whispering a frantic prayer. Then just as quickly, the chaos ceased. The ferry's stabilizers activated with a low hum, futuristic systems adjusting against the raging waters. The vessel straightened, slicing through the waves like a blade through silk. The laughter inside resumed, smooth and unaffected. It was as though nothing had happened at all. Amarachi opened her eyes, trembling but amazed. What kind of technology was this? What kind of people traveled like gods over the sea? Her ears caught fragments of whispers again. Passengers leaned close, their voices carrying a reverent tone. The gathering, tonight. The council will decide. Her pulse quickened. The gathering? The council? None of it made sense. She wanted to ask, to demand answers, but fear glued her tongue. Instead, she glanced once more at the man by the window. His gaze was back on the horizon now, but his presence lingered in her mind. Whoever he was not ordinary. The ferry glided on, deeper into the unknown. And then, her breath caught again. Far ahead, piercing through the mist, a glow emerged. At first faint, like scattered fireflies, then stronger, brighter, golden. Towers shimmering in the distance, bridges lit with neon veins, mansions perched on cliffs, glass walls catching the light like diamonds. An island, not just an island, an entire city of gold, rising out of the ocean like a vision from a dream. Amarachi's lips parted, her fear battling with awe. The ferry surged forward, carrying her straight toward the glowing island, a place that promised paradise, but hid secrets darker than the waters she had just crossed. The Billionaire's island unveils itself as paradise cloaked in secrecy. The ferry glided into the glowing harbor like a phantom. Amarachi pressed her forehead to the tinted glass, her eyes widening as the island unfolded before her in all its impossible splendor. It was not just land rising from the sea. It was a city crafted by dreams and money beyond comprehension. Towering glass palaces stretched toward the sky, their facades reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. Neon bridges arched gracefully over sparkling canals. Waterfalls cascaded from rocky cliffs, engineered to flow into hidden gardens lit with soft bioluminescent plants. Drones hummed overhead, darting like silent guardians, their red eyes flashing as they surveyed everything. The ferry docked at a pier lined with marble statues. Guards in white uniforms stood at perfect attention, bowing slightly as the passengers disembarked. The dock itself glowed faintly underfoot, powered by transparent solar panels that pulsed like veins of light. Amarachi hesitated, her knees trembling as she stepped off the vessel. A warm, tropical breeze brushed her face, carrying scents of jasmine and salt. She should have felt relief, but instead her chest tightened. This place was too perfect, too pristine, as if reality itself had been polished until it gleamed. She watched as passengers were greeted by attendants who handed them glasses of rare wine and silver envelopes. They laughed, hugged, exchanged handshakes, speaking of deals and alliances. Some were escorted into futuristic cars that floated silently above the ground, whisking them away along glass-paved roads. And then, something unexpected happened. A woman in a pearl-white uniform approached Amarachi with a flawless smile. "Welcome, madam. You're expected tonight." Before Amarachi could protest, the woman pressed something into her hand, a small black box. Inside lay a diamond-encrusted mask, delicate and shimmering under the harbor lights. Amarachi's mouth opened in confusion. "I think there's a mistake, But the attendant didn't wait for her explanation. Instead, she bowed politely and gestured toward a waiting tram. "Your presence at the gala will be most important." Amarachi's pulse spiked. She wanted to tell them she was not supposed to be here, that she had boarded the wrong bus, that she was just a tailor carrying a gown. But the words stuck in her throat. The smooth efficiency of the staff, the calm acceptance of the other guests. It was as though she had been absorbed into their world without permission, yet without question. She slipped the mask into her bag, her fingers trembling. The tram carried her deeper into the island, and her eyes drank in the sights with both wonder and dread. Mansions built of steel and glass floated over pools of turquoise water. Gardens grew not in soil, but in vertical walls of greenery, powered by hydroponics. Everywhere she looked, drones hovered, projecting holographic maps and scanning visitors discreetly. Solar fields shimmered on distant hills, their panels moving like an army of synchronized dancers, chasing the fading sun. It was paradise, yet something about it felt wrong. At a checkpoint, Amarachi noticed a servant kneeling as he adjusted an elite guest's shoe. His face was blank, his movements robotic, as though life had been drained out of him. Another servant bowed too low, her hands shaking as she carried a tray of drinks. Their eyes, when they flickered up for a second, carried a weight Amarachi recognized instantly. Quiet fear. A chill crept up her spine. This wasn't freedom, it wasn't joy, it was control wrapped in luxury. The tram stopped at a grand plaza where marble steps led into a palace with doors taller than any building she had ever seen in Lagos. Elite guests swept past her, their laughter bouncing off the crystal walls. Amarachi clutched her gown closer, wishing she could vanish into the crowd. But her discomfort only grew when she realized a drone camera hovered above her head, its tiny lens focused entirely on her. Wherever she moved, it followed, silent but watchful. Her heart pounded faster with every second. Why her? Before she could think further, a hand brushed against her arm. She turned sharply. A young servant stood there, his eyes darting nervously around before settling on hers. His voice was a whisper, trembling but urgent. "Do not remove your mask tonight." Amarachi froze. "What?" The servant's gaze was intense, his lips barely moving. "Your life depends on it. Whatever happens, keep it on." Before she could question him, another attendant called sharply, and the servant bowed, retreating quickly into the shadows. Amarachi's blood turned cold. She gripped the diamond mask inside her bag, her heart racing faster than it ever had in Lagos traffic. The island gleamed like a paradise, but its perfection was beginning to suffocate her. And tonight, at the gala, she would discover just how dangerous paradise could be. As the massive palace doors swung open, Amarachi stepped forward, diamond mask clutched in her trembling hand, knowing that once she entered, there would be no turning back. A gala of masked faces pulls Amarachi into a world of power and hidden agendas. The palace swallowed her in a sweep of light. Crystal chandeliers cascaded from a ceiling painted the color of midnight, their prisms scattering stars over a ballroom wide enough to hold a runway, a boardroom, and a dream. Champagne towers glittered like glass pyramids along the edges, while musicians in white played strings that pulsed like a heartbeat under the hush of wealth. From alcoves, lithe performers in feathered capes moved with liquid precision, their bodies describing flames and fountains, their eyes hidden by mirrored veils. Amarachi stood at the threshold, the diamond mask trembling in her hand before she fixed it to her face. The room seemed to tilt as she stepped inside. Waiters floated by with trays of canapes, arranged like artworks, gold leaf catching on oiled surfaces. A drone drifted overhead, its lens a black pupil, and she felt it choose her again. She forced a breath, felt the gown package against her ribs, and told herself to walk. Conversations unfurled around her in silken-coated strands. Supply corridors repositioned in Tangier. One man purred. Tokenized timber futures, quietly. A woman answered. Another pair discussed a medical startup as if it were a chess piece, moving human futures across an invisible board. The words sovereign immunity and carbon arbitration floated past like perfume, expensive and intangible. Everywhere she turned, fortunes were being rethreaded in whispers, and every whisper had consequences Amarachi could not see. She tried to be smaller than her fear, yet the spectacle dragged her gaze. Floor-to-ceiling glass opening onto terraces of moonlit water, niches filled with orchids that glowed faintly, a ring of light that chased the performers as though joy were programmable. She felt dazzled, as if a city had learned to sing and chosen wealth as its lyrics. And under the dazzle, terror stirred, the conviction that one wrong word would rip her mask away. It nearly happened when a woman in a sculptural velvet gown slid beside her, voice sweet, questions carven sharp. "Which house claims you?" she asked. "Which fund do you steward?" Amarachi's mouth went dry. She began to stammer. Then a low baritone eased between them. "Forgive me," the voice said, gentle, firm. "She's with me." Obinna. Even masked, he carried gravity like a tailored shadow. The woman's eyes cooled, She drifted off with a sugared smile that didn't reach her gaze. Obinna turned to Amarachi. Up close, he was not only powerful, he was precise. The kind of man who measured rooms without moving, who listened to storms and heard their rhythm. "Breathe," he murmured. She did, surprised that air could taste like relief. "Thank you," she said, words small behind her mask. He studied her, not like an interrogator, but like an architect planning a rescue. "You don't speak the code," he said softly, "yet you listen better than most." "I'm trying not to drown," she admitted, "a wise goal on this island." The hint of a smile ghosted his voice. "Walk with me." They drifted along the ballroom's periphery, a duet threaded by tension. People glanced, recalculated, whispered. At a display of couture gowns suspended in glass, Amarachi's fear blurred into fascination. Each piece was an equation of fabric and architecture, hand-cut pleats like ripples, metallic thread woven into programmable patterns that changed with temperature. "Whoever cut that bodice understands restraint," she murmured, forgetting herself. "They've balanced the line of the clavicle with the lift of the rib seam. It's breathing, not screaming." A silver-haired patron turned, intrigued. "You see construction, not glitter, rare." He probed, and Amarachi answered without boasting, describing bias cuts and hidden interlinings, the economics of quality versus spectacle. Heads nodded, laughter warmed. For a heartbeat, she belonged, not by pedigree, but by competence. Obinna watched, a quiet pride flickering. "You make them hear fabric," he said when the admirers drifted on. "I only told the truth." She lowered her gaze. "Truth is cheaper than diamonds." "Not here," he replied. "Here, truth bankrupts the wrong people." Before she could ask what he meant, a ripple of cold moved through the air. Chimamanda arrived, gowned like a comet, mask of hammered gold, smile honed to an edge. She kissed the air near Obinna's cheek, eyes never leaving Amarachi. "You picked an unexpected companion," she said lightly. "Wealth tends to prefer certainty." "Certainty is an illusion," Obinna answered, calm. "Competence is not." Chimamanda's gaze skimmed Amarachi, hunting origin stories, weak seams. "Competence is acceptable," she said, "but loyalty is currency." The word loyalty lingered, sticky as syrup, and immediately found echoes around them. "Loyalty to the council," someone whispered behind a hand. "Loyalty survives market weather," another murmured. "Loyalty is oxygen," a third intoned, and Amarachi wondered what suffocation looked like here. She slipped away to the edge of the terrace, lungs flaring, the sea a black sheet, flicking silver coins of moonlight. The drone drifted after her, patient, unblinking. She wrapped her arms around herself, the diamond mask feeling suddenly heavy, as if the stones remembered the weight of promises. That was when a figure in a matte black mask appeared from a shadowed column, posture tense, voice pitched to a thread. "You shouldn't be here," the stranger whispered. "They don't know your name, so they'll give you one, and then it will own you." "I boarded the wrong bus," Amarachi said. "I'm leaving after tonight." "No," the stranger said, urgency tightening. "No one leaves tonight, not before the vow. Keep your mask on. When the circle forms, do not speak your name. Do not raise your hand. If they mark you, you become inventory." Her stomach plummeted. Inventory? But the stranger had already withdrawn, swallowed by velvet and murmurs. Amarachi turned. Obinna stood a few paces away, too still, as if he had seen more than he would admit. "Stay close," he said, "and do exactly as I do." A bell tolled midnight, reverberating through glass and bone. Chandeliers dimmed to embers. Performers dissolved into shadows. Doors along the perimeter slid shut with a sigh like silk being cut. The beam champagne towers stilled, prisms catching a final flare of light. Across the floor, figures began to form a slow-moving ring, masks gleaming, silver, gold, obsidian, until the circle closed like a jeweled fist. Then the lights went out, and a single cold halo ignited at the ballroom's center. In the hush that followed, a voice neither male nor female filled the dark. Begin the ritual. And Amarachi felt the island decide what she would become. In the shadows of the island, Amarachi learns about Obinna's double life. The ballroom had transformed into something unearthly. With the chandeliers extinguished and only a cold halo of light burning at the center, every glittering mask became a silhouette, every whisper sharpened into a chant. Amarachi pressed her back against a marble pillar, trembling, as the masked guests closed ranks in a perfect circle. They bowed, not to each other, but to something unseen. The chant rose, words in a language Amarachi did not know, yet the reverence in their voices chilled her. She dared to peek. Men and women whose names probably dictated stock markets and governments bent their heads low, as though surrendering to gods invisible. At the circle's heart, a shadow flickered. Was it a hologram? A projection? She could not tell. But its presence commanded fear. Her pulse slammed in her ears. She did not belong here. One wrong movement, and they would see her for what she was, an outsider, a mistake, a girl who had simply boarded the wrong bus. And then a hand closed over hers. She almost screamed, but the voice was calm, low, steady. Don't move. Come. Obinna. Before she could think, he pulled her into a side corridor, his grip firm but protective. They slipped into the shadows just as the chant reached its peak. Amarachi's knees nearly buckled with relief, though her fear did not ease. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "The pledge," Obinna answered quietly, guiding her down a passage lit with blue strips along the floor. "Every cycle, they swear loyalty to the council. It is how power remains concentrated here." "The council? You'll understand in time," he said. Then he stopped, turning to face her. His mask was gone now, revealing sharp features carved by both hardship and privilege. His gaze held hers, not with suspicion, but with something more vulnerable. "But for now, I need you to know, you are not safe unless you are invisible." They stepped into a private terrace overlooking the ocean. The night breeze carried salt and jasmine, cooling Amarachi's burning skin. Below, the sea reflected the island's golden glow like liquid fire. Yet Obinna's face carried a weight that contradicted the beauty around them. "This island," he said slowly, "is a sanctuary. A place the elites built when they grew tired of the mainland. The blackouts, the strikes, the constant chaos. Here there is order, efficiency, no government interference, no noise, only wealth." His tone was steady, but Amarachi sensed a crack in it, something unspoken. "You talk as if you don't belong here," she said carefully. He turned away, his eyes tracing the restless waves. "Because I don't." The confession startled her. He exhaled, heavy with memory. "I was born in Abba. My father repaired shoes in a stall that leaked when it rained. My mother sold a kara by the roadside. I was not supposed to leave that life. But I built something, a software company, a global empire. I crossed oceans. I bought silence and influence. And still..." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Still I feel empty." Amarachi studied him. The polished suit, the calm authority, the whispers that followed his name. He was the kind of man she thought was untouchable. Yet here he was, confessing to a void that billions could not fill. "What do you want, then?" she asked softly. His eyes shifted back to hers, steady and searching. "Connection," Something that isn't a transaction, isn't a performance, something real. Her chest tightened. Against her will, she thought of her own story, her late nights stitching until her fingers bled, her client who belittled her dreams, her landlord who threatened to throw her out. She thought of her mother's tired voice over the phone, reminding her that survival was a duty, not a choice. "I know emptiness, too," she said, surprising herself with the rawness of her tone. "Not because I have too much, but because I have too little. Every day I fight to be seen, to prove that my work has worth, that I have worth." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't hollow. It was thick, charged, fragile. Two worlds colliding, yet somehow recognizing each other. Obinna stepped closer, his voice lower now. "Then maybe we both are tired of pretending." For a fleeting moment, Amarachi forgot where she was, the masks, the counsel, the fear. She only felt the weight of his words, the sincerity in his gaze. And in that fragile space, a bond formed. Not yet love, not yet trust, but something undeniable. Yet the island would not let them linger in vulnerability. A low hum filled the terrace. Amarachi's eyes darted upward. Drones, 3 of them, hovering above like mechanical vultures. Their lenses glowed red. One of them projected a beam of light onto the marble wall. Slowly, an image sharpened. Amarachi's heart stopped. It was her face, her features, unmasked, rotating on the holographic screen for all to see. And beneath it, a word flashing in angry crimson letters, unauthorized. Amarachi staggered back, her throat tightening as the drones focused their beams on her, the label searing into the night like a death sentence she could not yet understand. Amarachi becomes the target of suspicion and hidden enemies. The night after the drones exposed her face, Amarachi barely slept. Every sound outside her chamber felt like a summons, every flicker of light beneath the door like a warning. When dawn finally came, it brought no relief, only sharp footsteps echoing in the hallway. The door swung open, council guards entered, their uniforms black this time, not white, their eyes cold and precise. One stepped forward, voice clipped. "State your name. State your allegiance." Amarachi froze. Her throat was dry, her heart battering against her ribs. She wanted to explain, to confess, to plead that she was only a tailor who had boarded the wrong bus. But before her lips could part, another voice cut through the room like steel wrapped in silk. "She is with me." Obinna stepped in, his shoulders broad, his expression immovable. The guards shifted uneasily. Even here, his presence carried weight. "She is my invited guest," he said firmly. "Do you question me?" The guards exchanged glances. One bowed slightly. "The council has concerns." "I will address them myself," Obinna replied, his tone final. "Now leave us." Reluctantly, the guards withdrew. But Amarachi could feel their suspicion lingering like smoke. As the door shut, she whispered, "Obinna, what did I do?" He looked at her for a long moment, the shadows under his eyes deeper than before. "You existed," he said simply, "and sometimes that is enough to threaten them." By midday, the rumors had spread across the island like wildfire. At every corner, Amarachi felt eyes trailing her. Servants whispered behind trays. Elites paused in their conversations when she passed. Some said she was a spy sent to infiltrate the council. Others muttered that she was Obinna's weakness, that he had finally fallen prey to something as dangerous as love. The humiliation came at sunset. At a courtyard gathering, Chimamanda glided across the marble floor in a gown that shimmered like liquid bronze. Her smile was polished but venomous. In front of the crowd, she turned to Amarachi, her words sweetened with poison. Tell us, Chimamanda said, tilting her head, which empire funds your presence here? Or perhaps, she let her eyes sweep Amarachi's modest gown bag, you are simply a spectator, a tourist wandering into rooms far above her station. The laughter that followed cut Amarachi deeper than any blade. Her cheeks burned. She wanted to disappear. But before she could, Obinna stepped forward, his voice thunderous. Enough, Chimamanda! She is not your prey! The courtyard fell silent. Chimamanda's smile faltered just for a second, but her eyes glittered with triumph. By defending Amarachi publicly, Obinna had placed himself in direct defiance of the council's unspoken order. That night, Amarachi sat alone by the gardens, torn between choices that felt impossible. She could try to escape, vanish back into Lagos, return to her debts and her tiny room. But at least there she was invisible. Or she could stay, fight, to belong in a world where every step could destroy her. Her thoughts were broken by a quiet cough. An elderly gardener crouched nearby, pruning roses under the glow of artificial lamps. His hands were calloused, his uniform worn thin. He glanced at her, then at the drones circling overhead, and whispered, "Careful. Words grow ears here." She frowned. "Why are you helping me?" He gave a tired smile. "Because I see your fear, and because fear is something we all share." Amarachi leaned closer. His words spilled out in fragments, how the servants had signed contracts that bound them to the island forever, how those who tried to leave vanished without a trace, how paradise here was only another kind of prison. Her stomach knotted. She wanted to deny it, but the emptiness in his eyes told her it was truth. Over the following days, she began to notice it everywhere, the subtle stiffness in the servants' smiles, the tremor in their hands, the shadows in their eyes. And she began to notice something else, Obinna's own battles. He stood taller than the rest, yes, but there were cracks in his armor. She saw him at council meetings, his voice raised, his arguments sharp. He was pushing back, resisting rules others obeyed blindly. And with every defense he made for her, she saw the pressure mounting against him. Tension wound the air tight. Amarachi could feel it building like a storm. One evening as she wandered the halls, she paused outside a chamber when voices drifted through the crack in the door, cold, sharp, commanding. "Obinna has grown reckless. He is distracted. The girl is a liability. If he cannot be controlled, he must be removed." Amarachi's breath caught. She stumbled back, pressing herself against the wall, her chest rising and falling with panic. In that instant, she realized the council did not only see her as unauthorized, they saw her as the spark that could cost Obinna his place, or his life. Amarachi stood on the island's highest rooftop as if the city had been built for her to decide its fate. Glass towers caught neon and bent it into rivers of color. Terraces glowed like constellations someone had arranged by hand. The gown she still carried rested against her hip, a strange talisman from the life she wanted to keep. Obinna joined her, his footsteps careful as if he feared breaking something delicate. The night air was warm and smelled faintly of the sea and jasmine. For a moment they simply watched the island breathe. "You should leave," Amarachi said at last, voice small in the vastness. "Go back to Lagos, to what you had before. It's safer for you, safer for me." Obinna's laugh was soft, not mocking but weary. "Safer," he repeated, tasting the word as if it had a different flavor here. He turned to her, mask of composure slipping to reveal a man made human by doubt. "You think I don't know how dangerous this is? I built walls around my life. I bought silence. I thought that would be enough." His hands spread once, palms up. but silence is a poor substitute for something honest. She searched his face. The public persona, the headlines, the boardrooms, the charitable plaques could not cover the fissures she saw there. Sleepless lines at the corners of his eyes, the quickening under his skin when he thought someone might leave him. "Then why risk it?" she asked. "Why risk everything for me?" "Because you are not asking anything of me," he said. "You are being you. That is rarer than anything I have purchased." He stepped closer and lowered his voice. "I am drawn to your courage, not the loud kind, the quiet kind that keeps going when everything says, 'Stop.'" Her hands trembled. Truth blurred the edges of fear. He reached out, fingers ghosting the seam of her jaw, as if memorizing where sunlight would fall later. "I know what they will say," he continued. "They will call you a liability. They will try to strip you of story and give you a number. But I have watched you from the moment you stepped off that bus. You carry stories in the way you hold cloth, in how you fix a bent hem. I have never seen someone accept their life's fragility and work with it." Amarachi's chest tightened. The island's distant music seemed suddenly private, tuned to their conversation. She felt the weight of promises and the lightness of possibility at once. Words failed, so she reached up and kissed him. It was not a spectacle. It was a sealing of breath. The kiss tasted of salt and jasmine and something that felt dangerously like permission. They stayed long on that rooftop, talking like conspirators and lovers, their whispers slipping into plans. Obinna told her of a future where the council's rules could be dismantled, where people on the island would not be catalogued as assets or liabilities, but as collaborators. He spoke of reconfiguring the island's charter, of rewriting the clauses that bound servants to the estate and cloaked influence in secrecy. His voice carried conviction, and she saw for the first time a man whose power could be used to build rather than to fence. "When I was a child," Obinna confessed, "my mother taught me to mend shoes until the leather softened. She taught me to fix what was torn rather than toss it. I think about that now, about fixing rather than buying over. This place needs a mending." He smiled then, a brittle, hopeful thing. "But I cannot do it alone." Amarachi told him things she had never said aloud. The nights she sat by a single bulb sewing, the client who humiliated her at a fitting, the landlord who knocked on her door and demanded rent with a cruelty she had learned to expect. She spoke of wanting an atelier of her own, where apprentices like her could learn without being chewed up by debt. With each confession, the distance between them shrank. Where before lay a gulf of class and circumstance, now threads began to appear. Shared scarcity, shared hunger for meaning. They found secret pockets of the island to meet, a hydroponic terrace with a hidden bench, a maintenance corridor lined with pipes that sang when the tide shifted, a quiet greenhouse where orchids drank moonlight. In those stolen hours they constructed a montage of small rebellions. Obinna slipping through service doors to bring her books and fabric samples. Amarachi teaching a tired seamstress to reweave a torn seam so it did not show, both of them laughing until they forgot the surveillance above them. Each stolen moment was a stitch in the fragile garment of their trust. But paradise watched, and envy prowled its manicured gardens. Chimamanda, whose smile was the island's blade, began to notice the way Obinna paused when Amarachi entered a room. She threaded herself into other guests' ears, shaping whispers that painted Amarachi as a distraction and a threat. A single story is all it takes to shift an alliance. Soon, eyes that had been indifferent tracked Amarachi with new interest. Investors, board chairs, people who traded relationships like commodities. One night the gardener, stooped, eyes bright with the kind of caution that comes from years of watching privileged worlds, found Amarachi alone and spoke plainly. "They will try to make you an answer to a problem," he said, hands moving as if pruning the air. "They prefer tidy narratives. You are not tidy. That unsettles them. Be careful." His voice had no melodrama, only a steadiness that felt like a map. "When you belong to no ledger, you belong to yourself. Keep that." She nodded, feeling the razor edge of danger. The island was a theater of power. Lines could be rewritten, and people could be recast, with a rumor and a nod. Obinna's proposal to run, together, away from the island's gilded cage, arrived one electric evening when a storm massed over the sea, and the island lights shuddered. "Leave with me," he said. "A small crossing. We can start over. No titles, no debt ledgers recording us as assets. Just you and me. We can build your atelier. I can change things from the outside, or we can stay and fight. But I cannot promise safety there." Her heart hurled between fear and longing. To run with him meant admitting trust. To stay meant risking him for something larger than both of them. She remembered her mother's voice telling her to pick survival over stories, and she remembered the tailor's pride when a seam lay true. Her answer gathered in her chest like storm water. Before she could speak, her personal device, a small screen embedded in the cuff of her jacket, blinked to life. An anonymous digital message flashed. "Leave him tonight, or both of you will vanish." The words were built of ice. The rooftop felt very small. The neon city held its breath. Betrayal shakes Amarachi's world as the council tightens its grip. The digital warning haunted Amarachi through the night, each word flashing in her mind like lightning against the sea. "Leave him tonight, or both of you will vanish." She read it until the screen dimmed, then stared at Obinna's sleeping silhouette, wondering whether to run or confess. Love wrestled with fear until dawn's first light. When the sun rose, she made her choice. She would not abandon him. If the council wanted her gone, then they would have to face her courage. But paradise had its own ways of punishing defiance. That afternoon, Chimamanda struck with precision. At a formal reception in the glass atrium, where the ceiling shimmered like water and guests clinked glasses over whispered negotiations, a sudden outcry rang out. A jewel-encrusted bracelet, rare antique, said to belong to one of the council's founding families, had vanished. Servants searched trays and tables, their movements frantic yet rehearsed. And then, as if fate had chosen its victim, the bracelet appeared inside Amarachi's modest bag. Gasps sliced the air, heads turned, laughter died. Chimamanda stepped forward, her face painted with mock sorrow. "Oh, Amarachi," she said, voice dripping with false sympathy. "Perhaps Lagos habits are difficult to leave behind." The room erupted with murmurs. Words like thief, outsider, unauthorized spun around Amarachi until her knees threatened to buckle. She opened her mouth to protest, to cry out that she had been framed, but no one listened. The council's gaze bore down like iron bars. Then Obinna moved. He strode into the circle, eyes blazing, his voice carrying over the polished chamber. "Enough. You dare to humiliate her in my presence? You dare to accuse without proof?" His fury crackled through the room, silencing whispers. "If you call her a thief, then you call me a fool, for it is I who stand with her." Gasps followed. No one defied the council publicly. Not like this. But Obinna's words were not only defense, they were rebellion. His declaration transformed Amarachi's shame into a symbol. She was no longer just an accused girl. She was the woman Obinna risked everything for. And in that defiance, love became dangerous. The council's eyes narrowed. Amarachi saw it, the flicker of calculation, the shift of a chessboard where she and Obinna were now marked pieces. That night, punishment came quietly. Amarachi was stripped of the guest chamber she had been given and reassigned to the staff quarters, tiny concrete rooms beneath the island's glamour where light bulbs buzzed weakly and the scent of bleach clung to the air. The gesture was deliberate, a reminder that she did not belong, that her humiliation would not be forgotten. But exile has a way of opening doors. In the staff quarters, Amarachi found herself among those the council never considered visible, the gardeners, cooks, cleaners, and attendants who made paradise function. Their smiles were subdued, their laughter rare, their movements shadowed by drones, and slowly they began to trust her. One night, a young maid guided Amarachi through a narrow service corridor, her whisper urgent. "Follow me. You need to see what this island truly is." The path twisted into darkness, descending beneath the glass palaces into stone tunnels lined with pipes. The hum of machinery echoed through the walls, and the air smelled of salt and rust. These were not the manicured passages guests ever saw. The maid's lantern revealed carvings of numbers scratched into the walls, marks left by hands, desperate to be remembered. "They sign contracts," the maid whispered, "contracts that say they will serve until their debts are paid. But the debts never end. They are trapped. We are all trapped." Amarachi's chest tightened. She touched the wall where someone had etched a date and a single word, home. The further they went, the more the island revealed its underbelly. Hidden doors led into chambers buzzing with drones, screens alive with data streams. Servants whispered about guests who disappeared, their names erased from records, their wealth absorbed into the council's empire. The paradise above was a theater. Below was a prison. One evening, Amarachi wandered deeper alone, her gown still clutched as if it tethered her to her past. She pushed through a heavy steel door and stumbled into a vast chamber humming with light. Rows of screens filled the walls. Each displayed files, biometric data, financial ledgers, dossiers with names of every guest on the island. Amarachi moved closer, her eyes scanning in disbelief. Every person was catalogued like merchandise. Her breath caught when she saw his name, Obinna Kalu. Beneath it, a status in red letters, targeted for elimination. Her knees weakened. She staggered back, heart racing. It wasn't just her. It wasn't just suspicion. The council had already decided Obinna's fate. Alone in the chamber, Amarachi stared at Obinna's name glowing on the screen, realizing that the man who had saved her, the man who trusted her, was already marked for destruction, and she was the only one who knew. Secrets unravel as Amarachi and Obinna plan their dangerous rebellion. The chamber of files haunted Amarachi long after she slipped back into the staff quarters. Each name glowing on the screens had been a revelation, but Obinna's file, targeted for elimination, burned like a wound in her mind. She could not unsee it. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined the council's cold precision, the way they planned his downfall, as though erasing a man's life was nothing more than adjusting numbers in a ledger. She could not stay silent, not when he was already marked. That night, Amarachi crept into the tunnels again. The dim lanterns swung above her as she retraced the route, her heart pounding. She knew the tunnels now, where the damp stones dripped with salt, where the hum of machinery grew louder, where servants carved secret signs of resistance. One wall bore the faint carving of a single phrase, "Freedom someday." She traced it with her finger, then pressed forward. At last, she reached a grate beneath Obinna's quarters. She tapped softly. 3 short knocks, a pause, 2 more. The pattern the gardener had taught her. Moments later the grate lifted and Obinna's hand reached down to pull her inside. Their reunion was wordless at first. Amarachi collapsed into his arms, clinging as if letting go would dissolve him. Obinna held her tightly, his chest rising and falling with unspoken relief. For a long moment, they stood in silence, both aware of the danger, yet unwilling to part. Finally, Amarachi pulled back, eyes burning. "Obinna, they've marked you. The council. I saw it myself." He frowned, his features taut. "Marked?" She nodded, voice trembling. "There's a chamber underground, files on every guest, dossiers, financial trails. They control everyone with secrets, and you. They've decided to eliminate you." Obinna's jaw tightened. He turned away, pacing across the room. "I knew they were watching me, but to mark me." His voice faltered. "They mean to take everything." "Yes," Amarachi said, following him. "And they'll take your life if you let them. You can't keep submitting, Obinna. You have to fight." He stopped, his gaze meeting hers. There was fire in her eyes, fire that reflected the flame inside him he had long tried to suppress. "Fight them?" "Amarachi, this is not a street quarrel. These are men and women who bend nations." "Then bend them back," she said fiercely. "You have something they don't. You have the truth, and people who are desperate for it." Her words settled over him like a mantle. Slowly, the tension in his shoulders shifted, not gone, but reshaped into resolve. Over the days that followed, Amarachi and Obinna worked in secrecy. She slipped between staff quarters and his chambers, carrying whispers and scraps of information. Together, they pieced the puzzle. Shell companies, feeding into the island's coffers, money laundering across continents, empires hidden in plain sight. The council's power wasn't only wealth, it was architecture, built on lies and enforced with fear. And quietly, servants began to choose sides. The gardener, the maid, the cook who slipped them. Coded notes on napkins, all carried the same hunger, freedom. "We have nothing left to lose," one whispered. "If you will fight, we will follow." Obinna grew more determined with each revelation, but he also grew more protective of Amarachi. One night, under the pale glow of his private terrace, he pressed something into her palm, a small emerald pendant, its surface carved with ancient patterns. "This was my mother's," he said softly. "She wore it when she sold Akara in Abba, saying it reminded her of hope. I want you to have it now, not as a gift of wealth, but as my vow. Whatever comes, I will not abandon you." Amarachi clutched the pendant, tears filling her eyes. "Then I will not abandon you either." Their bond strengthened with every secret shared, but danger grew sharper. Chimamanda circled them like a hawk, her smile more venomous with each passing day. One evening she confronted Obinna in a hall lined with marble statues. "You risk everything for her," she said, her voice low but lethal. "The council will destroy you. They will strip you of power, erase your name, seize your empire, all because of her." Obinna's answer was steady, final. "Then let them. I will not betray her." For the first time, Chimamanda's mask slipped, and rage flickered in her eyes. "Then you've already signed your death." The warning came too late. That night, Amarachi returned through the tunnels to find Obinna's chambers in chaos. The door had been forced open, guards in black swarming like vultures. She froze in the shadows as Obinna, unmasked, stood tall against them. "You will come with us," the lead guard declared. Obinna's jaw clenched. "And if I refuse?" The guard smirked. "You no longer have that choice." Before Amarachi could rush forward, the guards surged. They seized Obinna by the arms, dragging him toward the corridor. He caught her eyes in the shadows, his gaze steady even as chains clamped onto his wrists. Amarachi bit back a cry as Obinna was torn away, the sound of the guards' boots echoing through the gilded halls, leaving her clutching the emerald pendant, the only proof of the vow he had made. The island descends into chaos as rebellion brews in silence. Obinna's absence hung over the island like a storm cloud that refused to move. His chambers were sealed, his name erased from conversations, his allies too frightened to ask questions. Amarachi wandered through the staff corridors, numb, clutching the emerald pendant he had pressed into her palm. Every step felt heavier, every breath edged with despair. The council wasted no time. By dawn, they released a statement on the island's massive holographic screens. Obinna Kalu has been temporarily removed for review of his loyalty. The island remains secure, temporarily removed. Amarachi heard the euphemism for what it was: imprisonment, silencing, maybe even worse. Her chest tightened, but grief gave way to fury. She would not let them erase him. The servants felt it, too. In hushed corners and shadowed kitchens, they whispered Amarachi's name. She had stood beside Obinna when he defied the council, and now, with him gone, they turned to her. Some called her reckless, others courageous, but all admitted what none had dared before. She represented the possibility of breaking free. It began with a small group, maids, gardeners, cooks, meeting her in the tunnels. Their faces were weary, their hands blistered from years of silent servitude, but their eyes burned with a quiet defiance. "Show us a way," one begged. "We will follow." Amarachi swallowed her fear and nodded. "Then we fight, not with blades, but with truth." They moved through the tunnels like ghosts, lanterns flickering. At last they stumbled into a chamber Amarachi had not yet seen. Rows of humming servers, walls lined with glowing screens. Data pulsed across them. Biometric scans, surveillance footage, secret communications. This was no ordinary control room. It was the island's brain, the AI that monitored every guest, every servant, every breath. Amarachi's heart hammered as she read the files. Proof of money laundering, proof of secret disappearances, proof that the council didn't merely rule, they enslaved. The gardener stepped forward, awe in his cracked voice. "This is what they fear most, exposure." Her hands trembled as she pressed controls, not knowing how to navigate the system but guided by instinct and courage. With a single command, she triggered the island's projection network. Above the ballroom, across the harbor, in every corridor and plaza, the walls came alive with truth. Dossiers, contracts, chains disguised as agreements, exposed for all to see. Gasps erupted across the island. Elites paused mid-conversation, their champagne glasses frozen in mid-air. Murmurs rose, louder and louder, as the illusion of paradise cracked. "They lied to us. We've been watched. This is control, not sanctuary." Amarachi stood in the glow of the screens, her mask gone, her face uncovered for all to see. "This is the council's paradise," she declared, her voice echoing. "A paradise built on chains. If you believe in freedom, if you believe in truth, then do not let them silence you." Her words rippled outward like fire catching dry leaves. Rebellion flickered in the eyes of those who had been silent too long. But rebellion does not rise without resistance. Chimamanda appeared at the threshold of the control room, her gown trailing like molten gold, her mask shimmering with menace, her lips curled into a smile that was all venom. "So this is what you've chosen, Amarachi, to trade comfort for chaos?" Amarachi squared her shoulders. "I choose truth. You choose power. Chimamanda stepped closer, her heels clicking against the floor, her eyes glittering with rage. Truth feeds no one. Power builds islands, feeds nations, creates futures. Do you think love will hold you when the council strips you bare? Love holds more than your power ever will. Amarachi shot back, her voice steady. Power demands obedience, love inspires choice. The air between them thickened, their words clashing like blades. Chimamanda's envy was naked now, her voice breaking. You've undone years of loyalty for a man you barely know. Do you not see? You are nothing without him. Amarachi's gaze was unwavering. And yet you, with all your wealth and loyalty, cannot touch what I have with him. That is why you hate me. For a moment, silence reigned. Only the hum of servers filled the room. Then a cold, mechanical voice sliced through the air. Directive confirmed. Unauthorized subject, Amarachi Nwosu. Status erased. The screens flickered violently. Her name vanished from records. Her biometric file collapsed into static. On the island's network, she ceased to exist. The servants gasped. Chimamanda's smile widened, triumph curling across her lips. Amarachi felt the ground tilt beneath her. The council had spoken, not to imprison her, not to exile her physically, but to erase her digitally, to strip her from the very fabric of the island's existence. Amarachi faces exile, but love and courage fuel her final stand. The walls around Amarachi were not stone or steel, but screens. 1,000 of them, flickering with her face before dissolving into static. Her name blinked in and out. Amarachi Nwosu, erased. She pressed her palms against the glowing surfaces, but they were cold, unyielding. This was her prison, not built to chain her body, but to strip her from existence. On the screens, she watched her records vanish one by one. Birth certificate, non-existent. Lagos address, deleted. Financial trails, erased. To the council system, she had never lived. A ghost inside paradise. For the first time since she boarded the wrong bus, Amarachi felt her courage falter. She slid to the ground, clutching the emerald pendant Obinna had given her, her breath shallow. Was this what it meant to be nothing? To have the world forget you existed? Tears stung her eyes as memories surged. Her mother's laughter as she fried akara on the roadside. Her first clumsy stitches in the tailoring shop. Nights under a dim bulb, whispering dreams into fabric no one valued. And Obinna, his eyes steady when he told her she carried courage, his vow pressed into her palm like a lifeline. "No," she whispered, rising to her feet. "You can erase my name, but you will not erase me." As if in answer, a faint hum came from the far corner of the chamber. A hidden panel flickered, then split open. A small figure slipped inside, the gardener, his face lined with age and defiance. He carried a worn device, wires spilling from its sides like veins. "They think they control everything," he muttered, fingers flying across keys. But even paradise grows weeds. Before Amarachi could speak, the screens glitched violently. Her erased file reappeared, corrupted but alive, her name blinking again. The chamber door hissed open. "Run!" the gardener urged. "Find him. The island is ready to crack." Amarachi bolted into the corridors, her heart hammering. Servants guided her through hidden stairways, their faces alight with urgency. At last, she burst into a dim hall and froze. Obinna stood there, chained to a chair, his body bruised but unbroken, his head lifted slowly, and when his eyes met hers, something raw and unyielding passed between them. "Amarachi," he rasped, disbelief and relief colliding. She fell to her knees, breaking the chains with the gardener's device. "They tried to erase me," she whispered, "but I'm still here, and so are you." His hand closed over hers, weak but steady. Then, together we will finish this. They moved like shadows, slipping back into the AI control chambers. Servants followed, carrying stolen keycards and fragments of courage. The screen still flickered with council propaganda, but Obinna's fingers danced over the controls, overriding locks with codes only he knew. Drones swarmed, their red eyes glowing as they descended. Gasps rose from the servants as mechanical wings cut through the air. Amarachi braced for impact, but Obinna raised a hand. His voice was steady, commanding. "Override protocol, Obinna Kalu, founder access." The drones froze mid-air. Then, like soldiers bowing to a forgotten king, they shifted formation and turned their lenses outward, away from the servants, toward the council's golden palaces. A roar of awe swept the chamber. Amarachi stepped forward, her voice trembling but rising. "People of the island," she said, her words carrying through the commandeered screens. "You have been lied to. You've been told you are free, but you are chained. You've been told you are protected, but you are watched. Tonight, you have a choice. To bow to fear or to stand for freedom. Which will you choose?" Her voice echoed across plazas, ballrooms, harbors. Elites paused mid-dance, servants froze mid-task, drones hovered silently, and then like sparks in dry grass, murmurs rose. "She speaks truth. They lied to us. No more." The island trembled with awakening. Guests began tearing off masks, servants dropping trays to join the growing tide. The chant spread, "Freedom, freedom, freedom," until even the walls seemed to shiver. For a moment, Amarachi believed they could win, and then the lights flickered, once, twice. The screens spasmed, throwing sparks. The hum of servers grew erratic. Obinna's hands flew across the console. "They're cutting power." A final jolt tore through the chamber. The island's grid collapsed. Chandeliers sputtered into darkness. Neon bridges went black. Drones crashed into marble. Paradise plunged into night. The golden city extinguished, leaving Amarachi and Obinna standing in pitch darkness as the rebellion reached the brink of fire. A new dawn emerges from the ashes of paradise. Darkness covered the island like a shroud, but it did not stay silent for long. Sparks crackled from dead circuits, flames licked across solar fields, and towers that once shimmered with impossible light now flickered in blackout, their glass shells reflecting only fire. Drones fell from the sky in bursts of metal, their once perfect choreography collapsing into chaos. Paradise had become a battlefield. Amarachi clung to Obinna's hand as they moved through the chaos, guiding servants and guests alike toward the shore. People who had once walked past her without seeing now followed her voice as if it were a compass. "This way," she called, her voice cutting through the smoke. "To the harbor." Obinna moved beside her, commanding strength, even in exhaustion. His chains were gone, his authority reborn, not in wealth but in the courage to defy the council. Together they became unlikely leaders of the Exodus, shepherding hundreds through gardens now ablaze, past statues toppling into shards, past corridors where walls once whispered power, but now only echoed fear. When they reached the shore, the harbor was a scene out of a fever dream. Yachts and ferries bobbed wildly, their systems glitching. A single futuristic yacht, sleek and silver, still hummed with partial power. Its lights flickered but held. "This one," Obinna said, ushering Amarachi aboard first. Survivors poured in after them, servants with blistered hands, elites clutching jewels that suddenly meant nothing, children whose eyes had seen too much. The yacht's engines roared to life, slicing through waves as the burning island receded behind them. Amarachi turned, her throat tight. For a moment, she saw not towers collapsing, but memories. The masked gala, the diamond mask pressed into her hand, the tunnels carved with words of hope. Obinna's gaze steady under chandeliers. Now all of it crumbled. She pressed the emerald pendant against her chest and whispered goodbye. The voyage to Lagos was long, but dawn met them like a promise. The mainland skyline rose, raw and imperfect, buzzing with noise, life, and the grit of survival. Lagos had no golden towers, but it had something the island never would: freedom. Back in Surulere, Amarachi stood in a new space, not the cramped tailor's shop of her apprenticeship, but a wide, sunlit studio. Rolls of imported fabric leaned against the walls. Mannequins stood dressed in her designs, clean lines, bold cuts, pieces that spoke of strength. Her name was etched in gold letters on the glass, Amarachi Atelier. Clients came, not just for gowns, but for the story behind them. She was no longer the girl who begged for payment, but a woman whose name commanded respect. And behind her, always, Obinna stood, not as a shadow of authority, but as a partner. He invested not to own her dream, but to amplify it, reminding her each day that her courage had lit the fire that saved him. Their love, tested in tunnels and council halls, matured into something quieter but stronger. They laughed more easily now, argued about fabric colors and boardroom strategies, shared nights without fear of drones hovering overhead. Months later, Lagos witnessed a wedding unlike any it had seen before. In Echo Atlantic, glass towers rose around a sea-facing plaza transformed into a cathedral of light. The guest list blended worlds. Apprentices from Surulere sat beside CEOs, servants who had escaped the island dined beside ambassadors. Amarachi walked down an aisle draped in silk she had sewn herself, her gown a testament to resilience. Obinna waited in a tailored suit, his eyes never leaving hers. When they said their vows, the city roared with fireworks, and the Atlantic reflected their union in waves of silver. It was glamorous, yes, but also intimate, a celebration not of wealth but of survival, love, and the promise of building anew. After the wedding, Obinna unveiled his next step. His tech empire, once a fortress of private power, was being transformed. Platforms once used to hoard secrets were redesigned to democratize opportunity. Open-source tools for young entrepreneurs, AI-driven education hubs for underserved communities, grants for artisans like Amarachi had once been. Power, he said at a press conference, Amarachi's hand in his, is wasted when it builds walls. We will use it to build doors. Later that night, in the quiet of their wedding suite, Amarachi sat by the window, Lagos lights sprawling beneath her. She thought back to that morning at Ojuelegba bus park, the gown clutched in her arms, the wrong bus that changed everything. One mistake, she whispered, smiling softly, and destiny found me. Obinna slipped his arms around her shoulders, pressing a kiss to her temple. Not a mistake, he murmured. A beginning. She leaned into him, eyes closing, finally at peace. And then her device buzzed. She frowned, lifting it. The screen flickered with static before stabilizing into a single encrypted signal. The emblem that appeared was unmistakable, the council's crest, fractured but alive. A message pulsed across the screen in cold letters. The island falls, but the council endures. We are rebuilding, and we are watching. Amarachi's breath caught. She met Obinna's eyes. The fight was not over. As fireworks faded outside, the newlyweds stood in silence, the encrypted warning casting its shadow over their dawn. Proof that the council's grip had not been broken, only delayed. You've followed Amarachi's journey, Now I want to hear yours. What's one dream you're fighting for right now? Comment below and join our growing family by subscribing for more inspiring stories.